Hello, everybody. Ted Haggard here from the Storehouse in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We are the house church ministry of St. James Church. Hey, as you know, we're studying through the Bible, Genesis to Revelation, in the course of a year. We don't cover every chapter, but we cover every major theology. And today we are in 1 Samuel 17, which is about David and Goliath. And you know the story. You've heard it a million times about a weaker person conquering the older person by faith and all that kind of thing. But I think there's a lot more to this story than that. And I think we can look at this chapter, and we're going to do it real quickly. I have 15 minutes total to cover this for your convenience, but I think we can look at this as the way God sovereignly always prepares us to win. How God sovereignly always prepares people to be overcomers, and how God sovereignly always prepares us to be victorious. Of course, the New Testament verse that talks about that the most is Romans 8:28. And I read out of the New Living Translation. It says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose." But now, David, we're in 1 Samuel 17, remember? Okay, so David was the youngest boy of 8. He was the shepherd boy taking care of a flock of sheep. And so he learned how to use a slingshot. He learned how to fight with bears and lions. Now, he learned how to meditate on the scriptures and learned how to have a relationship with God. I mean, what's a boy do in a pasture day after day after day after day after day? He meditates on the scriptures. He sees the wonder of nature. He protects the sheep. He does all those things that if you love God and if you're called according to his purpose, who would have dreamed that all those things would come together so that he could protect the entire nation of Israel and be set up as a future king? Nobody would have guessed that. And but all those things were happening in his life, and he didn't despise them. He still responded to his father when his father wanted him to take his brothers who were warriors, wanted to take him some food. All right. He was humble with his dad. He was humble with the sheep. He went through this process, probably not knowing that he was in the middle of a divine mandate, but he just did it. All right. And that's what's required of us, to trust the Lord as we go through life, whether we think we're doing something significant or whether we think we're doing something that's just mundane and routine. In my lifetime, I've watched lots of people tell me that they've done things that were world-changing, and they weren't. Then I've watched lots of people do things that were world-changing, and they would say things like, "I hope this improves people's lives." But here's the way it works. If we love God and if we're called according to his purpose for us, then everything works together for their good. People who don't love God and who don't experience a calling according to God's purpose for them, those people are living a random life. And so when they say everything happens for a reason, it's not true. Everything happens for a reason for a Christian or a believer who loves God and is called according to his purpose. But the rest of them, when Darwin said that we were basically animals, he might have been right about some people. Now, they weren't created to be animals. They were created to be sons and daughters of God, but they might have chosen just to live like an animal, live according to instincts, live according to personal desires, live according to my own judgments. That's what animals do. All right, so technically, I don't think that's right, but actually in the lifestyle, that is right. So we are always learning to win. Let's look at 1 Samuel 17. In verse 3, I'll just point out a few verses here and kind of try to portray this for you. In verse 3, it says, okay, you've got the picture. There's Israel on one side, the Philistines on the other side, and a valley in between them. All right, so the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills with the valley in between them. Then I want you to see that there are powerful enemies of God's plan for your life. All right, and here it says, then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, a bronze coat of mail weighing 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him, carrying his shield. Now, so the enemies of your life and the enemies of God's calling on your life and the enemies of God's plan on your life are powerful. Now, they are intimidating and they are intelligent. All right. They are not powerful in contrast to God, but they will seem powerful. Remember when the spies went into the land of Israel to see if they could occupy it, and some of those guys came back saying, hey, there are giants in the land. We're just grasshoppers to them. Well, those were the guys who were wrong. And then 2 of the spies knew the land could be conquered, but it would be a war. And they were the ones that experienced God's full blessing. All right, so I want you to notice that the enemies of our lives are powerful, and they also mock us. Here, beginning with verse 8. Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across to the Israelites. Why are you all coming out to fight? He called. I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Okay, why were they terrified and deeply shaken? It's because they let Goliath set the terms. Here Goliath is saying, you've got an army, we've got an army, but I'm the strongest man. So you send your strongest man and I'll whoop him. Israel didn't have to agree to that. They could have sent commandos behind him and started eliminating them during the night. They could have come up the sides. They could have come up with all kinds of schemes. But Goliath, the enemy of our lives, set the terms for the battle, and Israel agreed to it. How crazy is that? Don't you do that with your life. You don't let the enemy set the agenda for you. You and God and your fellow believers, you guys set the agenda. And then you pursue it. And you just let Goliath stand out there in the field all he wants and yell all he wants. Actually, you could work around him. All right. So the enemy was setting the terms here. Okay. Now, I have been involved with church life since I was 16 years old, actually all my life. But I got saved when I was 16, Spirit-filled when I was in my early 20s. And I've been involved with church leadership all my life. Okay, here's what every failing pastor has told me through these years. They all say, well, for us to achieve God's plan for our church, we need more people and more money. All right, those are the 2 things they always need, more money and more people. All right, here, this story tells us that we have the right people already there if we can recognize them. And we have the resources that are there if we'll just use them wisely. All right, so our job is to use the resources that we receive wisely, and our job is to capitalize on the people that are right among us. Notice, they didn't even know who David was or what he was capable of. All right, here, when the Bible talks about this, go to verse 16. For 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. 17. One day Jesse said to David, take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See how your brothers are getting along and bring back a report of how they're doing. David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army at the valley, fighting against the Philistines. Verse 20. So David left the sheep So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts, as Jesse had directed him. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Now, that's so typical. Here are these guys unwilling to think creatively. They're letting Goliath set the standards. They're letting the battle plan be determined by the Philistines. But they shout and rally one another before they go to the battlefield to do nothing. Okay. And so it reminds me of so many of these people that think if we can just rally everybody and get them motivated, come on, you got to have some substance there. All right, in 21, it says, soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout his usual taunt of the army, just like the devil taunts us from time to time. All right, in verse 24, I want you to see this. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. So interesting that they were just rallying one another with these shouts and cries. Let me tell you something. Life won't work if you live it by emotion. If you think just motivating the crowd can give you success, brother. Okay, here it says, have you seen the giant? Now they talk about the devil's evidence. The men ask, he comes out every day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anybody who kills him. He will give the man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man won't have to pay taxes all the rest of his life. Can you imagine what a benefit that would be? David asked the soldier standing nearby, what will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? So David's seeing it, and there needed to be somebody from the outside that was able to see it clearly. And these men gave David the same reply. They said, yes, that is the reward for killing him. So here we have David working out motivations. And that's what you and I have to do every day. When we decide what we're going to do with our money, what we're going to do with our relationships, what we're going to do with our families, what we're going to do with our career, what we're really settling is what motivates us to do things. All right. And so then the accusations start from David's brothers. If you look all the way down at the end of verse 28, it says, I know your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. They start blaming David. All right, so here's the key. David replied to the Philistine. Now we're all the way down. We've moved ahead. And David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies. Now, where did that come from? It came from him sitting in fields day after day after day with no Nintendo, with no music to listen to, except him and his harp and worship. All right. He said, today the Lord will conquer you. Now, that's what everybody preaches on. But everybody, let me tell you something. If he wouldn't have already fought the bear, and if he wouldn't have already fought the lion, and if he wouldn't have already perfected his ability to use a sling, this would be coughing in the wind. I've watched people all my life get spirit-filled with no skills, with no ability to think, with no anything, no finances, and a prophet called them to the nations, and they go to some other country and destroy their family, destroy their kids, lose everything, and the people in the other country don't want them, but they'd received a prophecy to go into the nations for the gospel. And they pray, they're spiritual, they're godly, but they're unskilled. They're not capable. They're not wise. They're not thoughtful. Okay, that is not the case here. This was not just a supernatural incident. This was an incident that was groomed by the Lord. all of David's growing up years. He was the baby boy. He was beaten up. He was mocked. You know how it is with brothers. Okay, so all the preparation led to a moment where he had his sling and he hit the giant right where he'd practiced for, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years, whatever. And he hit him and he killed him. And they thought, wow, that's amazing. We never expected him to do it. You might be the man that nobody expects to do it. You might be the woman nobody expects to do it. But develop your skills at every opportunity. Learn at every opportunity. Never think anything is mundane if you are a lover of God and called according to his purpose. Then everything that you go through is preparation from the Lord for victory in the future. Okay. All right. We're out of time. That's all for this week. It was fun talking to you. If you're in Colorado Springs, come on by on Sunday and we'll be glad to have you, and we'll talk about the scriptures and enjoy one another. Okay. Bye-bye.